Hello, I'm Roy Harmon, and this is the Hot Pursuit podcast brought to you by LeadPost, the retargeting platform built to help agencies increase revenue and improve ROI for their clients by identifying website visitors that don't convert. Learn more at leadpost.com/agency. Today, we are joined by Maurice Rahmey, the founder and CEO of Disruptive Digital. And he knows a lot about many marketing topics and lead generation topics. But today we're going to be focusing specifically on meta ads and how to generate better quality leads through meta ads. That is, in my experience, can be a big problem, generating leads that know who you are when you contact them and don't say, I don't know what you're talking about. So, well, you filled out this form. I don't remember. We're going to get rid of those people, and Maurice is going to help us figure out how. Thanks, Maurice.
Happy to be here.
Before we get into the specifics from sort of a high-level view, can you tell us some of the innovative tactics that can be used on Meta to acquire higher quality leads?
Yeah, for sure. So I think before we jump into that, I would love to give a little bit of background on myself to help contextualize the opportunities that Meta has. So I've been running my agency for about the last 6 years. And prior to that, actually worked at Facebook for about 5 years. So have a really deep understanding of how the platform works and how to get the most results out of it when it comes to driving direct response outcomes, in particular leads. And I think one of the areas that I've noticed a lot of advertisers that I am both working with and talking to have is, I think sometimes you try and look at fighting the system because you think you can outsmart it. And what I found has been the better approach over the last 10 years of working with Facebook ads is Facebook is going to be a lot smarter at getting you the types of people that you're looking for than you will ever be. But you need to feed it with the right components to be able to get the right output back out. And so I always say good data in leads to good data out, and bad data in leads to bad data out. And it's the same thing here. And so realistically, as we start to think about a lot of the tactics that are available, I think the big components that you need to think about is how can you provide Facebook with the information that it needs to be able to get you the types of customers that you're looking for? And then secondarily to that too is there's a number of products and solutions that Meta has built specifically for lead generation. It should always be a yes and situation where you're using all of the tactics that are available at your disposal if it makes sense for your business versus just kind of testing one or two things. And again, you can build towards that. But I think as long as you are leaning into how the system works and leaning into the solutions that are available to you, that's what's going to allow you in the long run to be able to drive success and not only get cheap leads, but also be able to get quality leads as well. So happy to dive into what that means in a second, but wanted to kind of give that context of sort of how I think about it, or the philosophy around how to drive leads on Facebook.
Definitely. And I think it's important for people to understand that background about you as well. That's interesting. So you're saying a lot of people, and I've seen this myself, they want to outsmart the system, whether it's Google ads, whether it's Facebook, and they feel like all these ad networks are just trying to get as much of their money as they can, which, we're all trying to get as much money as we can. But I think what you're saying is it's better, rather than trying to outsmart the system, it's better to understand the system and make it work for you. Because, I would imagine these multi-billion-dollar companies probably have a leg up on us when it comes to understanding their own algorithms. So can you then get into some of the primary things that you think are pretty generally applicable when it comes to effective tactics on Meta?
Yeah, for sure. So, again, it's kind of like what you just said as well, right? And the way that I like to think about this is essentially these systems are really, really smart at getting you exactly what you ask for. That has a plus and a minus, right? If you tell the system that you want the cheapest leads possible, it will get you the cheapest leads possible. It's not by outsmarting the system that you're going to get cheaper leads. The question then becomes, though, are those cheap leads actually going to convert? And without putting the guardrails in place or the mechanisms in place to be able to train the algorithm to go after the right types of users, that's where you're going to miss out. And so we can kind of break this down into a number of different categories. I'm going to kind of go a little bit backwards and then come up. And so I think one of the biggest areas that I think is an opportunity when it comes to lead gen on Facebook is, I mentioned this idea of essentially testing into everything. If you think about it, not every consumer wants to engage in the same way, right? And so what I mean by that is some people are willing to fill out a lead form directly on Facebook. Some people want to get a little bit more educated and maybe go to a website. Some people want to get on a phone call. Some people want to have a live chat experience to convert. And so what's interesting is Meta allows you to do all four of those components. What we usually recommend, it depends on the business, is you want to eventually test into all four of those types of conversion destinations. So on Meta in particular, you can choose to send somebody to your website to convert. You can choose to send somebody into an instant form directly on Meta where that information already exists and then they convert there. You can choose to have somebody call directly from the ad to have somebody pick up and kind of close that call. Or you can choose to have somebody go into a messenger or, WhatsApp messaging integration, and it can be automated through solutions that Meta has to be able to capture that information as well. So why is this important? It's like I said, right? Different people are going to react to different conversion destinations. They have different ways that they want to engage, and Meta knows that as well. And so if you're only doing, for example, website forms, you're going to miss out on all the people that are more likely to want to call up or chat or do an instant form. And so that's why it's good to kind of do all four. At the same time, they all have their benefits and drawbacks. For example, when you send somebody to your website, you might end up finding that cost per lead is going to be a lot more expensive, but the quality will be a lot higher versus sending somebody to an instant form where their information's already filled out. The cost per lead of that person will probably be significantly cheaper, but the quality will probably be a little bit worse. And that's why it's important, I guess, as a second component to make sure that you're measuring downstream, because it's very easy to look at that website conversion and say, wow, it's costing me 3 times as much as an instant form. But if that person is converting 5 times greater, then that's probably a good place for you to be. So I definitely think it's worthwhile to test every single one of those destinations, but it's important to make sure that you have the right measurement in place to make sure that you're tracking how those people are converting, because they're all going to look a little bit differently. And we can go into a little bit of sort of how you can put guardrails into each of those specific destinations, because there are ways, even once you're sending somebody to those destinations, to improve the quality on each channel specifically. I'll pause there for a second if you have any questions.
So that's really interesting. The idea of using all of these, I guess you're diversifying your risk, so to speak, that somebody won't fill out a certain kind of form. And I mean, I would imagine there's also depending on your frequency, people are probably going to see multiple types. And so you potentially get another bite at the apple, and maybe they didn't want to convert this way, but they'll convert another way.
Yes, and no. So one of the best kind of ways to think about this as an example, and it relates here, right, is the way that Meta's auction works is that they want to deliver the right ad to the right person at the right time. And so, Roy, you might be more interested in an image ad, and I might be more interested in watching a video ad. And so they know that. And so if I'm only running video ads, you're never going to be eligible. You're probably not going to see an image ad, right? You're not going to see a video ad because that's not what you're interested in engaging with. I will be in that subset of users. And so you're actually limiting your reach by only doing one type of content. It's the same thing with these different destinations, right? You might be more inclined to go to the website, and I might be more inclined to go to an instant form. If I'm only sending people to instant forms, I am never going to reach you as a consumer because I'm not hitting my entire addressable audience. And so Meta is taking that into consideration. And those destinations, at the end of the day, if you think about it, right? Meta is looking at it and saying, we want to get the cheapest lead possible on an instant form. Who is the most likely person to be the cheapest person to convert on an instant form? It's Maurice. Roy is not going to be cheap, so we're not going to deliver an ad to him. Now, all of a sudden, you introduce website forms as another type of ad, and Meta goes, who is most likely to convert on a website form? It's Roy, and they're going to deliver ads to you now. If you're not doing all of those different components, yeah, you might hit both of us, but it's less likely. You're actually creating more destination points. It's not only about increasing the likelihood of the conversion, it's also about increasing the likelihood of the ad delivery to additional types of users.
So you're expanding your available inventory and potentially increasing your conversion rate. So that is a great thing to understand. One of the things that I think a lot of people think about is just it's an extra investment of time to do these different things. But when you think about it that way, it's pretty clear that time you spend is going to be worth it in the long run, because basically you're giving Facebook the tools that it needs to get you the conversions that it can get you.
Exactly. And I would say, look, you don't have to start with everything. I think it's a phased approach. And the way that I would think about where you should start is based on the type of business that you are and the type of lead flow that you currently have. And so what I mean by that is if you have a very low consideration purchase cycle, it might make more sense to do instant forms. Why? Because you're going to capture that information pretty quickly. And yeah, maybe it's not going to convert as well as a website will, but to get somebody to book a class or book a class at a gym, right, is a lot easier to do in an instant form because you're playing a volume game and they're going to get something, maybe it's $30 to $50, right? On the flip side, let's say that you're, a B2B company and you're trying to get the right type of customer in the door. Instant forms might not be the best way because you probably have a more finite audience of people that you want to go after. And so quality is going to be more important because you don't want to have your sales team go through all of those different leads that you're getting, even if you have an automated process. In that case, it might make sense to send somebody to a website because, yeah, the cost is going to be more expensive. But at the end of the day, that booking that you're going to get from a payout perspective is going to be a lot higher. So you can absorb that cost a little bit more. I think it's really important that you start with what's going to make the most sense for your business based on the type of business that you have. And I would say 99% of advertisers should focus on instant forms or web forms first. Then you can layer in the other channels, right? Whether it's doing the opposite one, adding in Messenger and WhatsApp, adding in click to call. Those components are kind of like the cherry on top, and it's something that you can test eventually. But for 99% of advertisers, it's either going to be the instant form and the web form. And the way that I like to look at it with my advertisers is it depends on what that conversion flow looks like, what the type of business that you're working on is. Local businesses, smaller consideration cycle, instant forms can work really well. Larger businesses with an enterprise sales cycle probably makes sense to send somebody to the website. And that's kind of where I would start. And then, like I said, you can expand. And then the next step, once you kind of start to layer that in is how do you start to put guardrails in place, both on your website or on the instant form to make sure that you're increasing the quality versus just getting the cheapest lead possible. And there are ways to do that, which I'm happy to jump into now if you're interested.
Yeah, so I think we've got at least a basic understanding of how to get started bringing those leads in. But one of the big concerns, especially when it comes to any of these native lead gen forms on any of the platforms, is lead quality. And then to a lesser degree, that can be an issue with web forms as well. So that would be really great to hear about some ways to make sure that those are going to be quality leads.
Yeah. So let's start with web forms first, because it's actually, I think, simpler in a lot of ways. And I can speak about my own website for our agency and some of the tactics that I've taken to improve the quality of the leads that I can get from ads. I mentioned this earlier, but these systems are really smart at getting you exactly what you want. And you have to put guardrails in place in order to be able to drive success. And so what I mean by that is if I was to go to Facebook and say, hey, Facebook, get me as many people to fill out my lead form as possible, it will do exactly that. But what'll end up happening is it's not actually like looking and seeing if those people are quality, because it can't see 30 days later if that person's going to convert. And so I'm an agency. I write a lot of content for my website. And when I have my leads come in, one of the things that I see is that a lot of my leads end up being other agencies. That's not beneficial for me because that's not somebody who I am going to sell to. They're not my customer. And so what I've basically done is if I'm running ads, you might look at that and say, oh, Facebook, I'm going to put in targeting and say that I want to hit people that are interested in e-commerce, for example. That doesn't really do anything because agencies are also interested in e-commerce. It's not really getting to the core problem. Targeting is not the way that you're going to improve the quality. There are things that you can do around like putting in your CRM lists, for example, and building lookalikes. So that basically the way that works is that you take a list of customers. You need to have over 1,000 of them to be able to put in. And what'll basically end up happening is that Facebook will find the top 1% or 10%, up to 10% of their population, let's say in the United States, and then create that audience for you to go after. I don't have 1,000 customers. Most people don't have 1,000 customers, especially in the B2B space. It's not going to work for a lot of advertisers to kind of do that. And so instead, like you can try and go a little bit higher and say, maybe I'll do, the top 1,000 people who I've had a meeting with. But again, that's not actually a customer. So instead of looking at the targeting as being this explicit thing that you do on Facebook and say, hey, find me these users that are interested in e-commerce or here's a lookalike of my customers if you don't have it. Instead, what you can do is train the system on the other side. And so what I mean by that is I mentioned this idea of if you tell Facebook you want leads, it's going to get you leads. What if you actually trained the system instead to only focus on qualified leads? In my case, what I've done is I've updated my web form and now I ask somebody, hey, what industry are you in? And if somebody says that they work for an agency, I can have it now that that's an unqualified lead. And so now what I can do is go back to Facebook and say, hey, I only want you to optimize for qualified leads. And now the way that it's working is Facebook is only going to track and convert and fire when somebody says that they're not an agency. So they come in and they're an email address, but they say they're any industry but an agency. And now all of a sudden what I'm able to do is I'm able to have the system basically focus on only the people I care about. Yeah, I might get a couple of those people that are working at agencies, but it's taking out that false positive and only focusing on the right types of people. On the flip side, right, I'm working with an advertiser in the financial services space, and they want to go after people that have a net worth of over $250,000 a month. Originally, they were optimizing for any lead that came in the door. And now what we've done is we've shifted their conversions to focus only on people when they say that they have over $250,000 in net worth. And what we found is that the cost per lead has gone up because there's less people. But for people that are over $250,000 a month, that number has gone up dramatically. The cost to acquire those users has gone down dramatically. We're getting more of the right types of users. We haven't changed anything with the targeting. We haven't changed anything in terms of like what's happening on the platform. All we've done is change the data that Facebook is seeing to focus more on the types of people that we care about. And so now that data, that visibility that Facebook is tracking is only focused on the highest quality users so that we can get them down the road. And that's what we found has worked really well from a website perspective, is essentially just making sure that you're only tracking and optimizing in the back end to push back that data to Facebook versus going after every lead that you see.
That is very applicable to lead post users. So let's say somebody's using lead post and they're getting industry information, age, whatever demographic, firmographic data, whether it's through the form or not. Are you able to then basically say, based on these different attributes, only count these as a lead? So if I want to focus on a certain job title, whatever the case is, that's amazing. And can you go into just a little bit about the mechanics of that? Is it you set it to where the form leads them to a certain page, or is it like an event?
It can be one of two ways, right? Usually the way that it works with Facebook is you implement their pixel onto your website. And then anytime that somebody triggers an event, let's say that it's hitting that email submit button, that's going to say, hey, this is a lead. Facebook's going to say this is a lead. All you're really doing is taking that exact same approach and just appending a little bit more information, where you're either doing one of two things. You're passing a little bit more data and saying like, hey, what type of lead is this? This is somebody that makes $100,000. This is somebody that makes $250,000, et cetera. And you can take that and build a rule within Facebook to only optimize for those types of people. Or what you can do is just have it where the pixel itself is only firing for those types of events too. So you can either set the rule yourself on Facebook. In their backend, there's a way to set up these like custom conversions, they're called. The other way that you can do it is only have the events filter and fire for those events. And so instead, maybe in the past, what you were doing was you were saying anybody that hits the submit button, we're going to fire a lead event. Well, you can actually move forward and saying, and you can do this with the coding and say, hey, anybody that hits the submit lead button and has this criteria as part of their form, fire the button. Anybody that hits the submit lead button and doesn't have that criteria, we're just not going to fire that event. And so that's the way that you can kind of do it. It's a little bit more technical, but at a high level, there's a couple of different ways that you can go about kind of making that happen.
And is that something that Disruptive Digital handles for its clients?
Yes.
Or is it, okay, so it's pretty much the ads and the on-page things that need to happen as far as conversion tracking and training the algorithm and everything?
Exactly. Yeah. We work with our clients to make sure that we're setting up events in the right way to be able to optimize for your end goal. Because at the end of the day, like I brought up this financial services company, we worked with them to redo their tracking to essentially ingest the data that they cared about, and then started to filter the data that Facebook was seeing to make sure that we were only optimizing for the types of quality customers that they were caring about. Because before that, again, their return on ad spend for a customer was significantly lower. Now it's much higher, right? We're paying more to acquire users, like leads, but the cost for the customer itself ended up coming down significantly as a result, because we're getting people that are more likely to be our type of customer.
And what about targeting? How defined is your audiences?
The system is the targeting. So again, if you're training, like I said, the system is really, really smart, and you tell it exactly what you want and it will get you exactly what you want. In this particular instance, if you were to go untargeted, and say, hey, I just want as many leads as possible, you're going to get cheaper leads than any other component. It doesn't see the quality piece. And so what we've done is we haven't changed the targeting. We're going broad. We're going after everybody. But what we've done is we've changed the optimization. So the optimization now is what's doing the targeting, because Facebook is saying, hey, there's 250 million people in the US on Facebook, 200 plus million people on Facebook. This company wants to get people that have a $250,000 net worth. And we know that because this is the event that they're trying to fire on. We're going to only try and get people that are likely to take this action. So the system is doing the targeting. But what we've done is we've set up the optimization to be the targeting. You don't need targeting if you have the right optimization mechanisms in place. And that's going to get you the best results possible versus you inferring what you think the quality customer is going to be. Because at the end of the day, like I gave the example with the e-com interest, right? I'm still going to get agencies that are going to reach out, right? If that's the case, because agencies are still interested in e-commerce and interests don't equal intent, for example. And so it's better to kind of use the behavioral data and lean into it and make sure that the system has that right feedback loop versus trying to do the targeting yourself.
I also think it's very difficult for people. I think people think that maybe they are a little better at targeting than they are. We will look at different analytics and we'll say, look, all our people buy from 9 to 10 a.m. on Tuesday, or look, we've got more women, or they're all, and those things there, it's usually such a small sample size that there's just no way you're going to be able to do it better than Facebook. So what your approach does is you say, let's let Facebook look at as much data as in its audience as it can. Let's give it as many different ad types so that it can pick the best ad type. And you're really just saying like, look, let's let Facebook go to work. We're going to trust them to get out there and make things happen. And then when you're done, you, of course, I'm sure have the metrics to show that that's effective. Can you talk about some of the things you think are the most important metrics to look at to make sure that this is working?
So I can tell you anecdotally, when I used to work at Facebook, I used to run split tests again for clients where I'd say, hey, we're going to do it the old way that you used to do it with all this targeting and segmentation. And then we're just going to do my way where I'm just going to focus on a broad audience, optimizing for your end goal. And again, this was, let's say, more e-commerce. So you saw the revenue immediately. The broad audience always outperformed the segmented approach by like at least 3x. It was crazy. It would always drive better CPAs, better return on ad spend, because at the end of the day, you're kind of giving the system the full liquidity, which means that you're going to get lower CPM and you're going to get better results. To answer your question of the metrics that you should care about, at the end of the day, it's your end goal, right? It's not about, oh, my lead came in at $5 or $10 and normally it was 20. That's amazing. It should be about how much is my customer costing me? What does that lifetime value look at? We're looking at the front end data to understand the cost per lead. But again, it depends, right? If you're an advertiser that's going to convert and book an appointment, let's say within a day from a lead, it's much easier to look at sales data. If it's something that's happening 30 days later, it's a little bit harder. There are things that you can do, right? You can ingest that sales data back into Facebook to measure it, but it's going to take longer to get results. And so one thing that we've done is we've basically set up maybe proxies to make sure that we're focusing on cost per qualified lead, right? So again, every business is going to be different in terms of the results that they should look at. But I would say it's less about click-through rate. It's less about view rate. It's less about the CPMs. All that really matters is, are you acquiring people towards your end goal at a rate that's going to be profitable for your business? And some businesses need to look at it at a cost per lead. But even then, you can probably go to cost per qualified lead. Other businesses can focus more on return on ad spend or cost per acquisition because they can actually close the loop a lot quicker, maybe because they don't have as long of a sales process.
It's really easy to get distracted by all the metrics that Facebook provides. It's great that they provide them, and they don't have easy access unless you give them access to revenue data and conversion on your site. So of course, they're going to have that click-through rate data and all that. But if you get distracted and you're like, I'm paying $100 a lead and I could do this and pay $5 a lead. Well, if you're paying $100 a lead and that lead's bringing you $1,000 and you're paying $5, but it's only bringing you 10, I mean, we really got to get down to the revenue and figure out what's affecting your bottom line.
Exactly. Yeah. It sounds hard to do, but there are ways to pipe that data back in to actually be able to measure that. And so that's something that we're doing with all of our lead gen advertisers that we work with. Is we're saying, hey, we want to pipe this data back in, and that'll get into the instant morphs as well. There's some really interesting stuff that you can do as well. You can pipe that data back in to be able to measure and see which ads are actually driving the sales and not just the leads, which is very cool, right? It's not like it just sits and all you're seeing is, hey, this person drove the lead and then we don't know what happens after that. You can do that on the back end as well, not in Facebook, where you can connect it, by doing the right types of tracking, whether you're putting on UTMs or looking at, the source of the ad, for example. But you could also just make your life easier, quote unquote, by essentially pushing that data back into Facebook and looking at it tied exactly to the ad to understand what's driving sales and what isn't.
And what about, so when it comes to conversions, how many conversions would they need to see to be able to give Facebook enough to work with to make this effective?
The general rule of thumb is that you need at least 50 conversions per ad set or per audience is the best way to think about it per week in order for Facebook to be stabilized. And so why is that the number? So basically the way that Facebook works is every single time that you launch an ad set, it's almost like it's starting from zero. Not really, but it's almost starting from zero. Or Facebook's going, hey, we have this new ad. We have this new audience that we're going after. Here's the objective. We need to go and find people. What ends up happening is the system will start to look for people that are going to convert. And it gets 1 or 2 conversions. And then it goes, hey, we got 1 or 2 people that converted. Let's go after more people that kind of look similar to this profile. They go 3 or 4. But it's very volatile in the beginning as it's trying to find those people. The more data that Facebook has as it's accumulating what the type of conversion is that you care about, the more it stabilizes and it's able to find more of those people that you ultimately are trying to convert. And so generally speaking, this is called the learning phase. And it takes about 50 conversions, give or take, to be able to get to that point where Facebook is like, we're confident that we know that we're getting the type of end result that you're looking for. And this is the price that it's going to be. And so generally speaking, what you'll see is in the beginning, there's a lot of volatility, maybe for the first 10 to 20 to 30 conversions, where maybe it starts at $10 cost per acquisition, then it goes up to 20, then it goes back down to 15. And then once you hit around 50, maybe it stabilizes and it's always at that $15 mark. As you start to look at your conversions come in, make sure that you have enough budget that you're able to hit that 50 conversion mark. And you should theoretically wait a week to be able to know if it's working or not. However, at the same time, if you've gotten 0 conversions in 3 days, it's probably not working. You can probably know after 2 or 3 days if you're going on the right track, right? If you're at 20 to 30 conversions after 3 days, you probably have a rough idea of where you're going to end up. So it's not like all of a sudden magically you're going to get 50 conversions on day 7. Use some basic common sense to figure out if a campaign is on the path to success or if a campaign isn't on the path to success. But generally speaking, you want to be getting 50 conversions per week per audience or per ad set.
So if for some reason they, and maybe this is not, well, surely this would have to be an issue sometimes. If somebody is not able to get to that 50 conversion a week benchmark, would you recommend that they step back and look at some other earlier positive engagement? Or do you think it's better to consider a different approach for people who are probably smaller advertisers?
So I think there's a couple of components here. When I say 50 conversions, I mean 50 leads. I don't mean 50 sales. That number sounds scary, but again, you have to kind of look at it in context, right? So hypothetically speaking, let's say that your cost per acquisition is $50. That means that you need to be spending $2,500 a week, which is about $357 a day, right? You have to kind of do the math to figure out what that looks like. The first thing I would do is ask and say, okay, you're saying, oh, I don't want to spend, let's just say $400 per audience per day on my ads. It's too much. I'd say, well, how many campaigns are you running? How many ads are you running? And if the answer is I'm running 3, yeah, it's because then you have to spend $1,200 a day. And I get that. So the first thing I would do is consolidate, keep it small. And then once you're seeing success, you can build and do the next thing. So if you're not taking that consolidated approach and really honing in, I'd say it's better to spend $400 on one campaign than to spend $100 on 3 different campaigns or 4 different campaigns, right? Because you're actually going to hurt yourself by not spending enough. So that would be the first thing I would do. Second thing I would say is, look, at the end of the day, everything has a barrier to entry to be able to succeed. And so if you were to come and say, hey, I don't want to spend $400 a day at all, I only want to spend $200 a day, I'd say, look, you try it. If you get close to 50, you're probably in a good place. But if you're going to end up at sub 30, it's probably not worth it. You're probably wasting money in that case, right? You need to make sure that you're putting the right budget against this to make it work. And again, every business is going to be different. A company that has a larger cost per lead, maybe because they're a harder sale, you're going to need to have a bigger budget. If you have a smaller cost per lead because you have an easier sell, you need a smaller budget. So it's all relative to the situation. But I'd say, number one, make sure you're consolidated. Like, you shouldn't be spreading your budget around. It's better to spend, like I said, let's say $400 on one campaign versus across 4 campaigns. And number two, if you can't get quite to 50, if you're coming in a little bit underneath that, you'll probably be okay. But if it's going to be less than, if it's going to be in that like 20 to 30 range, you're kind of pushing it, and it probably makes sense to just invest. And better to fail fast and invest properly than to let it bleed slowly.
For people who are in that, you talked about that barrier to entry. If they can't meet that barrier to entry, are you saying that you don't think this approach will be effective, or that they should wait before they invest in Facebook?
I would personally, I would wait before I would invest, because there are other things that you can do maybe to get a lower cost per lead. Maybe the quality will be worse, right? So let's say that you want to send somebody to your website. It'll be cheaper to send somebody to a lead form. You can do a lead form instead. And so that'll be a lower budget. Let's say that originally you were asking somebody for their name and email and birthday. That's going to be more expensive than just asking somebody for their name or email, because the more fields you're asking somebody to fill out, it's probably going to be more expensive to get somebody to convert. So if you can't afford the budget at whatever your form looks like, you might need to make compromises in other places to be able to get that spend to work for you. There's half measures and there's full measures, right? You need to make sure that if you're going to do this, you want to do this the right way, because if you're only dipping your toe in, you're not going to get results. It's probably not worth it. And there's an opportunity cost, because then you're spending time to try and make it work. You're spending money that's probably not going to pan out the way that you had hoped. I think it's better to essentially try and do this in a way that's going to lead to strong business outcomes versus just checking the box and saying, yeah, we're running Facebook ads.
And is there anybody else, any other type of business that you would recommend not do this? Like, for example, I know a lot of people say B2B is not typically a great choice for Facebook.
So I think it depends on what type of B2B you're doing. I think if you're focusing on SMBs, Facebook can work really, really well. But again, this kind of comes down to the question of, where do you send people? In reality, it probably makes sense to send somebody to your website than to an instant form, because you want to try and get their work email. It's going to be harder to get that on Facebook. And what you can do even on your website, this is what I've done with our lead forms, is I have more control over how it works on my website. And so now anybody that enters an email, if they say that they're Gmail or Yahoo, we don't accept that email and we make them put in their work email. So you have more control over what that looks like. And ultimately, at the end of the day, everybody's on Facebook and Instagram, and they do have their work hat on at some point, right? While they're consuming content. Nobody's like looking at Facebook and Instagram and saying, now I'm in personal mode, right? People are multifaceted, and it's the same thing here. You just need to make sure that you're ingesting the right types of data. So I would say on the B2B side, specifically for SMB, because of the scale and volume that you get, I think Facebook can work really, really well. But you probably need to focus more on sending people to your website than to the instant form, where you're more prone to get less quality leads because it's pulling in Gmails, for example, and you're maybe not going to get the right work information. I think on the enterprise side, it depends, right? The way that I always describe this to people, I said, look, if you're focusing on account-based marketing, where you're saying, I only want to focus on the Fortune 100 or 500, is probably not going to be the best way to do it, because you don't have the ability to target those types of consumers. I think LinkedIn is obviously a lot better for that, because you can actually focus on companies that you want to go after and focus on the specific titles like C-suite that you want to go after. At the same time, the way that I describe it is, at the end of the day, Facebook is about scale. And if you're only focused on trying to go after, I'm making this up, the CTOs of the Fortune 500, that's only 500 people that you need to go after. It probably doesn't make sense to spend money on Facebook to be able to acquire those users.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your agency and how you operate?
We've been in business, like I said, for about 6 years. Part of the reason why I left about 6 years ago from Facebook was one of the things that I was noticing with a lot of the businesses that I was working with, and I worked with a number of B2B brands, tech brands, telecom brands, was that in order to be able to succeed, you need to think more holistically about the business beyond what's happening with the media. You need to understand the unit economics of the business. You need to be able to think about the creative, what that web experience looks like when somebody actually gets to your website, to be able to be educated to convert. And if you're not thinking more holistically, you're going to actually lose that sale, because media is only one part of it. You need to think a little bit more broadly. And so when I left about 6 years ago, I said, what if I take the same consultative mindset and help clients? Because this is how we're going to help them grow. Since I've left, I've been focusing on 3 core areas to help clients, both strategically and tactically. 1 is data, 2 is creative, 3rd is the website experience, or that destination experience. So data is a couple of components. It's how do you make sure that you're building the right flywheel of data fidelity or signal fidelity between the ad platforms and your own business. Because at the end of the day, you need to have those things working together and speaking to each other to get the best results. But then beyond that, it's understanding the unit economics of the business to make sure you're getting the right types of customers in the door. And then lastly, being able to measure appropriately. Without any of those things, you don't have a business, right? You need to be able to succeed from data as a foundational layer. Second is creative, because even if you have the right flywheel and inputs and outputs going between the platform and your business, if you don't have the right types of creative to speak to your target consumer to get them to stop the scroll, you're going to lose that person's attention and your competitor is going to win. And then third is that destination experience or that web experience, because even if you have the best ad ever that gets somebody to stop and click, if they're taken to a suboptimal experience on your website where they don't feel like they're getting what they need to convert, especially on mobile, where over 95% of Meta's impressions are delivered, you're going to lose that sale or you're going to lose that conversion. By bringing those three things together and then taking a test and learn mindset across all three of those to be able to iterate and grow, that's where you're going to be able to succeed. And so we've been working with a number of different brands. We have a few in the lead gen that have lead gen end goals. So we work with a few different businesses in the franchisee space that are trying to acquire leads for their locations. We're working with B2B SaaS right now as well to help them drive leads. And then we're working with a couple of brands in the financial services space to help them try and get quality leads as well. So for me, it's less about how do we get the cheapest leads possible. It's how do we get you the best customers possible at the price that's going to be profitable for your business. And so that's the way that we've been trying to approach it with all of our accounts, is getting the leads in the door, but then making sure that they're the appropriate leads to be able to make you money.
If they want to find out more about the agency, it's disruptivedigital.agency?
That's correct. And you can reach out to me on LinkedIn as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. That was really very informative, and I probably could talk to you for another 3 or 4 hours and get a lot of great things, but I think we'll just let people reach out to you. And it seems like you're really well suited, well situated to help people a lot with their meta ads.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, I've been doing it for 10 years. I hope I know what I'm doing.
All right. Thanks, Maurice.
Thank you.